apologize. We're not leaving you guys permanently. We only have our iPhones, and we got this special "your battery's dying" alarm. So for 2 seconds, somebody's going to have the most ultimate power of being the host, and we will be back in like 2 seconds. We've gotten this down to a science.
We'll time you.
I picked Diana to be the host. She does such a great job on the show.
And it's still recording the same stream. So no one think that we're on.
Matt's the host. We can't hear you, Matt.
Break and show their butts or something.
Matt, you're muted.
Matt, you're muted.
Really good at it.
Click. Oh, now he's pretending.
I am so good at not unmuting myself. I was like, that's my skill.
You're back.
Oh, you guys are back. That was really quick.
Hey, that was fast.
Nailed it.
2 seconds. Who timed
you
that?
got it. We asked a lot of interview questions during that time. You missed some good stuff.
Oh, great. We will use that footage. All right. I think we're ready for the next question. Thank you so much for being patient with us. We like to say we're run and gun, just the two of us and our 2 cell phones.
Yeah.
One day we shall become famous and have technology. So our third question is, what's a moment in your career that you had a moment of failure, and what did it teach you? And we're gonna go in back from where we started with Misa, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, most moments in my career have been failures because I'm not doing acting full time. It's just a hobby. So it's not my full-time job, but I have definitely, I remember when I first got out of college, and I loved doing improv, and I had been on the team there for 4 years, and I really missed it. So I went and I applied to these improv troupes on Craigslist, back in the day. And I got to like the finals, and then they didn't pick me. And I was like really sad about it. And like you go through that moment of like rejection and like, why wasn't I good enough? But it also forced me to be like, wait a minute, I should just start my own troupe. And that's what I did. So, and then that's how I met John and Jamie. And, 16 years later.
I was there from day one. High five, Misa. She's my best and oldest Los Angeles friends now.
So without that failure, I wouldn't have this, current success. So I'm very thankful.
Ricky has a term for artists with day jobs he uses.
Bivocational.
That's it. Bivocational artists.
Like
and we've started using that for people who act in community theater or act like you are doing with your crew, but like have to have a day job, or they have a different day job. We know scientist actors and teacher actors. We know them all. And so we started calling them bivocational. It's like acting is your career. It's just, you got to do other stuff too. Jamie.
Oh, there's so many to choose from. The first thing that popped into my head was Misa and John were there. It was when we got booked to headline the main stage at the Comedy Store, our troupe, and we were so excited. I mean, I was like, this is a moment. Like, we're headlining the main stage at the Comedy Store. And then we did the show. They booked like 9 million comedians to go before us. So by the time the main stage act, like the headlining act came out, the audience had been there for hours.
Oh no.
And in between and they were good comedians, but like, so in between each act, a few people would trickle out. And by the time we went up on stage, there were, I want to say maybe 3 people left. Is that accurate? And before we were introduced, they all stood up, and I could see them being like, please let us go. And I literally I think I almost cried, and I was like, please stay and watch us. I was like, literally begged the last table of people to please stay. I was like, just watch at least a little bit so we can always say we headlined the Comedy Store and it won't be a total lie. And I was like almost crying, and they were like, okay. So I guilted these poor people who had been there for so many hours to watch us. It was like midnight at this point. I think it started at like 6:30, and like they sat and were like, fine. And then we did our show, and I was so happy, but it was also so depressing. I was like, this isn't at all what I thought it would feel like. Whatever, it's on my resume. Nobody knows.
That's a beautiful, terrible story, because I think I've been an audience member in one of those situations. Ricky has my list. I'm sorry, and my memory's bad. Diana.
Thank you. What comes to mind in this moment is a time in which I didn't listen to my instincts. I was co-producing a show, and something had come up, and an individual involved in the show was really unhappy with the way something was going. And instead of wanting to work face-to-face and talk to this individual, they chose to send an email. And my instinct was, no, we have to be in the same room and have this conversation, and I think they'll understand a lot more. And so the email was sent. I didn't trust my instinct and fight to have it be in person. The email was sent. And the next day, when I arrived in front of the theater, the individual who received the email was sitting there in a little chair that they had brought as a prop. So imagine this person sitting on the sidewalk looking very angry. And I get out of the car and I know what's coming down. And I knew this would happen. And we eventually talked it out, and everything was actually made better. Quite often, a problem will lead to better communication. So sometimes when you're facing a problem, it's not the end of the world, right? But I took away from that I need to trust my own instincts and follow those, like go to the mat on my instincts, because it's all we have. Also, managing expectations, my own and others. So that's what I came out of that. Trust my instincts, manage expectations. Thank you.
I love that. John.
Oh, Diana, it's so funny that you mentioned that, because it plays off the what you're talking about is so much of a thing that the managing expectations element part. There's one year when I was working at this big Oktoberfest celebration I was telling you guys about, and I'm the stage director. I'm in charge of a lot of stuff, and I'm the host of the show, and I'm the person who translates for the German band. I speak German fluently, so it's like a lot of moving parts in this whole thing that's going on. And there's one particular year where I was like, a lot of pressure was being put on me in all sorts of different ways in the nature of the show. And I had really high expectations of what the show should be. And I started really becoming what I hate to deal with as an actor, to have a director that's a taskmaster asshole, basically, you know. And I found I didn't really realize what I was becoming until some of my friends were like, you know, some of the people that I was working with told me, you know, behind, you know, backstage or whatever on off time about how that was happening. And I'm like, oh, well, we're all in this together. We're all focusing on the same thing. We all have the same goals. They should be in there just as enthusiastic as I am. And if they're not, that's their problem. And they should get out if they're, you know, like this whole thing. And I realized that, you know, this concept of like focusing so much on the outcome and not focusing on what you've already built and on the people and their individual struggles of where they're coming at to come together. It's more important to operate as a team. And that's where, when everybody's working together and everybody's emotionally invested and feels like everybody is involved in the final outcome, it doesn't matter what your dreams are or what you think it can be, even though I felt like I was doing it for truly altruistic reasons. In other words, I want to put on a great show ultimately for the audience. Like I kept thinking about the audience, but having a safe home and having the people in the production feel connected and feel like that is your home base. So much more can grow from that. With individual people putting in their own effort. Otherwise you start to get into unintentional self-sabotage, where a lot of people start to just kind of don't care because they don't want to put their effort into something that maybe in their minds might make the jerkwad look good, you know? So you just have to really realize like it's about people ultimately in the beginning as well, not necessarily about your outcome. So managing expectations, I think, kind of plays in that same role. And I learned a lot about that for myself. So I have to be much more careful about being nice.
I love that.
Really?
David.
That seems to be kind of the theme, managing expectations. One of my failures that I keep learning from, that I keep thinking about is the first time I ever tried to produce a show in Hollywood, and the expectations that I had for that, specifically as far as like people coming to see the show. You know, I mean, I learned a lot that first show that I did. It was a variety show. It was at a bar, and the first thing that I did when I was pre-producing the show is make a list of every single friend and family member that I have, and I'm like, well, of course they're all going to be there. And I see everyone else shaking their heads like, nope, they're definitely not going to be there, because we've all learned is, you know, the friends and family are the first people that are not going to be there because they know they're forgiven if they don't show up. So focus on strangers to get strangers to your show, and you're doing your job correctly. That's the first thing I learned. But you know,
or don't forgive your family members.
Or don't forget. Right. But that's, I mean, but that's that. At the time, I was like, okay, this is terrible. Like, why am I doing this? You know. But on the flip side, is my expectation was that would be my defining moment of that show going badly. And you know, I produced 12 more shows after that, and every time I did it, I learned a little bit more. And that's what I learned. It was the kind of the goal is to, you want to fail the first few times because you know what you're doing wrong, and you figure out what not to do next time. And so, you know, eventually you're getting an audience, but you're like, oh my God, you're coming, and they're like, of course I'm going to come to your shows. You do all these great shows. I'm like, okay, great, you know. So yeah, expectations, and that was a failure that I definitely learned from, that I still think about these days. So yeah.
Family sometimes doesn't know when to show up, so we get it. We understand.
I would literally, I mean, the show started 20 minutes late because I kept walking out onto the street, kind of looking both ways, saying, where are they? You know, let's hold the show for another 5 minutes. I know they're going to be here. I know more people are going to be showing up. Nope.
Miles.
So I would say my biggest failure as an artist, or really even just as a person, is miscommunication. Either from my end or from their end, whoever, doesn't matter, the miscommunication still happened. A great example of that is I was the artistic director of a 99-seat theater here in LA for over a year and a half in Leimert Park. I was literally running a theater company for a legendary jazz artist, and I've only been in LA at the time for a year. And my understanding of the arrangement was that I was going to do my best on a show, build a school, and be at the meeting. And for that, they would give me $100, blah, 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 and I'd have a theater. What I didn't understand, and what I wasn't communicating well with them, was that they didn't want me just for those things, but also to be the house manager and to be there every day. And I'm like, I just moved to California. I need to go make money, blah, 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 blah. You're only giving me a stipend. And I ended up making a show. I did the show. The school fell through, so I didn't do the school. That's fair. I was at every meeting, but by the time the theater and I came to the understanding that I wasn't doing enough work in their eyes, and I thought I was, it was already too late. And so I lost that job.
Did it teach you anything?
Oh, I forgot that was part of the miscommunication.
Just to learn something.
What it taught me is that, you know, we're all human. We all are making mistakes. We all make mistakes all the time. And that was one of the hardest things I had to go through, especially since moving to LA. But what it really did, ironically, what everyone else is saying, is it made me hedge my expectations. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but I like Jamie said earlier, I have to be as vulnerable as possible as an actor, but also have my shield up at the same time. And I think that is what I really want to do.
Matt.
That has been my biggest failure, is using the mute button. No, I'm going to kind of dance around this. Having been now in the theater for X number of years, the failure list is long. I mean, there's some great moments, but there's a lot of challenges, and failure is kind of a tough word. I consider myself a pragmatic optimist. And so I kind of realize how life is, and then try to find the bright, shiny side of it. If I were to look at an example, I would say just recently, my wife Berta and I were running our theater space and big on Fringe. And while it wasn't a failure, the pandemic coming and us closing down just changed everything. Mm-hmm. And it was really just a slam in the face that we're starting basically from zero. But what I really do try to find in all my failures and anything that doesn't come up. Part of it's managing expectations. Part of it is like, maybe I don't do this next time, or I've got to be clearer with my communication. It really is, if you can't learn from it and grow from it, then you should just step out of doing theater, because it is going to be challenging. We're not going to get paid as much. We're not going to get all the audiences we want. When we do, we should treasure it, because it does not happen. But we have to love it for the sake of loving it. And so failure is just one of the things that can happen, and it can't be a reaction. It's not saying Berta and I were bad at producing. It does not mean that we didn't know what we were doing, but we still have a lot to learn. So I think failure is part of life. I'd hate to actually live in a life where we always all won. I don't even know how that would work. Like if everybody won the lottery and everybody won everything, they got what they wanted. It is the challenge of it. But, having a good attitude about it goes a long way. So if you can get tough, like you said, the vulnerability and tough, you can keep that tough and keep doing it, then you win. So even with the failure, you can still win. If you go back, if David had stopped, failure would have won. And so I don't necessarily consider that first thing failure. That was an unfortunate circumstance. It's too bad. But look, he learned and he went on and did 11 more shows. So we've got to take that and take that negative and just, make the lemonade out of lemons. It's cheesy, but I think we kind of need it, especially now.
The opposite coin of this question, which is, what was a success and what did it teach you?
What was a success? I mean, I would say my biggest success, or when I'm proudest of, kind of what is the work I've done with the Hollywood Fringe. Like working in the Hollywood Fringe, I've really established myself as a player here in LA. I'm meeting people, and this year I was finally starting to use that. We had a show go off Broadway, and I now had clients in Japan. And so, but all of that came from the Hollywood Fringe. And so it was utilizing the connections and all that from the Fringe to do it. And then, the pandemic. So it's changing. But yeah, I would say work with Hollywood Fringe.
Miles?
That's actually a really easy one for me too. I've produced off the top of my head, I'll have to count it to make sure official later, but it's like 6 plays and 5 short films, all on a shoestring budget, all of them here in LA. But on top of that, I would say my biggest success is actually Romeo and Juliet virtually. I spent 3 months breaking down history of theater, figure out how to make Romeo and Juliet on Zoom. And I watch it. Half of the fucking half of
That's okay.
Half of the views on YouTube on Matt's page are probably just for me going, I can't believe I did this.
I love that. David.
Biggest success. You're looking at it, baby. Tilted frame. But besides that, I guess the biggest thing for me since starting stage managing and being in Hollywood is the Magic Castle, I guess. I really had to translate what I was doing for live theater into magicians, which is a very different ball of wax, because there are kind of acting, but there is like technical stuff that really has to happen every single time. And they're just different from actors in a way that I can't really describe. They've been doing their same act for 30 years. How about that? You know, and so actors, they have, you know, if they're lucky, they have maybe 6 or 8 weeks of rehearsal before a show opens. But magicians will be doing the same act for sometime 20, 30 years, and being able to work with them and bringing my knowledge to the theater, and that I'm pretty proud of that. Yeah, it's been great for the past couple of years. So yeah, that's my success.
Wonderful. John.
One of my favorite memories and a success that I remember specifically in the world of improv was a show at the North Hollywood Arts Center that we did. And I think we were an improv troupe for we'd probably been together for what, like 2 years at that point in time, maybe 3 years, something like that. Not even that long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So
probably a year.
A year. So we were there doing, we had rehearsals there at one of their spaces, and something came together where, I don't know if a show fell through, whatever happened, there was like, suddenly the theater was open and available on like, I think it was a Saturday night. Like it was and that's a big theater. I mean, how many seats are in that theater? That's probably at least 300, something like that. So, we went and we did it. And the coolest thing was we also had a lot of support from the technical side. So we had sound support, we had music cues, we had lighting. And it shows, even in an improv show, usually you don't have all those things. Usually it's just black box, lights up and lights down, maybe a little music cue in between. But to have the kind of additional support to keep the energy going on was great. So we created a whole new song to introduce ourselves. We wrote a song from scratch to introduce the troupe and everything. And it was just such a magical moment. And I'm so glad that when you're an improv artist, you do a lot of shows. Do I invite my grandma to every single show? No, I don't, because I know it's hard for my grandma to make it out to any of my shows. But this one, somehow it was coming together, and it was looking so good that was the show that I really put all my chips in and really pushed to bring my friends and family to come down. I think we did a decent job. I mean, it was short notice and everything, but I think we probably had like maybe 80 people in the house or something like that, which was one of the biggest shows that we've done. It felt small because it's a huge theater, but that's how it works sometimes. And I just remember feeling afterwards, like, I'm so glad that my family and some of my friends who haven't seen me do other stuff took the opportunity to come out and see that. And it's something that I think they will still have in their mind of like, you know, that I'm good at what I do, that I do have these skills, that I am able to entertain people. And, you know, my grandma still talks about it today. So that's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Can't see the hand. Diana, should have it memorized by now.
Quite all right. Thank you so much. 2 things come to mind, so I will try to be mercifully brief. One, I work with another theater artist named Andre Esterlis, and he and I did a play called Dead Certain. Matt actually hosted us in his theater at one point. We took it to New York. We brought it back. We ran it. We put it down for several years. We picked it back up. We installed it in a hotel's meeting room, like a big meeting room in downtown San Francisco, and ran that two-hander for a year. Selling out that show. I actually got to design a set. I'm not a set designer, but I could see what we needed to do. And I designed it, he had it built, and that was amazing. So that was a great experience. But most recently, something happened that I consider an even greater human success. I did a short one-person show, and we did a digital version of it with the Marsh. And in this show, the character is a lesbian whose family has disinvited her and her wife to Thanksgiving. This is just post the 2016 election, and her family has empowered to disinvite her because her girlfriend is now her wife. And she's very upset by this, of course, and she goes to talk to a therapist, and the scene is her talking to a therapist. And at the end of the play, her father, who she always thought had voted for 45 and didn't approve of her, said, I was wrong. I was wrong about you, and I was wrong about my politics. A friend of the director saw this and told him that her family has always been very conservative. While she herself is queer, she's also her own identifying term queer. She is also very conservative. She shared this video with her family as a way to let them know that she was queer and that it opened dialogue between her and her family. And that felt like an enormous human success. So thank you.
I love that so much. Oh, I love a story like that. Jamie, yes.
Well, first I would say that it was harder for me to come up with this one than the failures question, which I think means I have some stuff to work on. There's one moment that came to mind that I don't know if it's like my lifelong greatest success, but it certainly felt like it in the moment when it was happening. And that was when I was in high school. My go-to monologue was from Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, which is like 50% of people's go-to monologues. But I was just obsessed with that character, and I was obsessed with that play. I was obsessed with Tennessee Williams. I knew every word to that play by the time I got to college. And obviously in high school, I was too young to actually play Maggie. But later, there was an audition for Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and I was like, this is my moment. No one does this show. Like, it wasn't a show I ever saw people doing. And I was like, I don't want to come off weird. I don't want to be too much. I had all these things like prior to the audition. And then I was like, you know what, whatever. I know every single word to this. And I did what you're not supposed to do. And I went in full costume and full character. And I did what I did. And they told me, well, I booked it, and I did like a 6-month run of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. And it was, at the time, at least, it's still one of my favorite acting moments, was getting to play a role that I'd wanted to play my entire life. And the director told me after he booked it, he was like, yeah, you were weird and you were too much, but we also knew we were casting you the second you walked in the room. And it was like taking that risk and doing what you're told not to do, and committing to what feels right to you in that moment worked. And I guess that's also a lesson of like, everyone's advice is dumb. No one knows what they're talking about. Everyone's making it up as they go along. So do what feels right. And sometimes it'll work and sometimes it won't. But as a sub success of that is, there was one show, we had a really nice theater to work in and everything was great. But there was one show where, for whatever reason, all of the lights went out except for one spotlight. And if you've seen Cat on a Hot Tin Roof or read it, you know that basically the entire first act is Maggie's monologue, and there's hardly anything else going on. So I talked for 45 minutes or however long that act is, in one spotlight. And then it's a 3-act. So in between acts, they were able to bring in technicians that were able to fix it, but they couldn't do that while we were performing. And that was one of the coolest. Like, it was super weird. It was like a classic play done very modern and noir. But it was just like a really cool moment for me, that I just to make that work and to do it and feel good about what I did, even though it was so bizarre and nothing like we rehearsed, was a really cool sub moment. So.
I love that so much, and I'm glad you got your part. Like, that's something actors dream of. So yay. Yes. Misa.
Hi. Okay. So I would say that my success is related to my failure. And I think that it's, not waiting for opportunity to come to me and be cast in an improv troupe, but to start my own. So I feel like because of that, you know, I put out an ad in Craigslist, and I met John, and through John I met Jamie, and I've met John's brother Paul, and we had all these other people come into our group through when we were doing classes at IO. And you know, for 7 years we performed consistently, and they became like my improv family. And we've done tons of shows, from, you know, tiny coffee shops in the middle of nowhere to main stage at Comedy Store that, you know, didn't really have an audience, but it looks good on the resume. And I think like that is something that I can always go back to, and especially like when you know, we always have those moments of self-doubt and like, oh, what am I doing? Like, am I even good enough? You know, like, why would somebody find my art creative? And just look back, be like, well, you know, these people have stuck with me throughout the years. Like, there must be something good, you know. We've had people pay at our shows, and like that's where we met Matthew, and we played at his theater, and that's the reason I'm in this group right now. So it's like, if I didn't take that chance back in 2004, I would be on a different path right now. So I don't know if I would know any of you guys, because I met Diana through, you know, Tilted Frame through Matthew. So, and then Miles and David through Matthew, and then Dana and Ricky, you guys tonight. So I feel like it's kind of serendipitous, and I consider it a great success.
It's a huge success because I love that story.
I
love the whole story.
Hey guys, if you like what we just did, there's going to be plenty more coming up. Please like, comment, subscribe. Our Venmo is in the description. Please support us if you can. Our cats need the money.